Discover the incredible moment that transformed the life of a wheelchair-bound billionaire, when Oliver Grant received a letter that would unravel everything he thought he knew about legacy and belonging. Staring out from his penthouse, the glittering skyline of New York mirrored the emptiness he felt inside. In his glossy world of high stakes and sharper deals, Oliver sifted through mundane stacks of mail, his heart set on the next corporate conquest. Yet amidst the bills and flyers came something entirely different, a delicate envelope that seemed to defy the digital age. The ornate cursive invited curiosity, almost as if it had transported him back to a simpler time. As he read the letter, the news of being an heir to a family ranch in Mississippi, the weight of his solitude surged alongside a piercing skepticism. Could a dilapidated ranch in a forgotten town offer solace in a life primarily occupied with power plays? Doubt clawed at him, but the nagging voice urging him back into the arms of commerce lost its strength. He decided then to visit, yearning for something beyond gilded walls and financial triumph. Arriving at the dust-laden road that led into the small town, he was immediately confronted with a reality so stark it stung. The vibrant, weathered faces of the community were filled with an unmistakable resilience, but Oliver's initial comfort in his tycoon identity began to crumble. They greeted him with tentative smiles, their eyes awash with hope that cast a long shadow over his finest suits and luxury cars. Unease settled in his gut. This was not a world of merger meetings or boardroom battles. Here, amid laughter and struggle, he felt painfully out of place. As he explored further, Oliver encountered Sarah, a fierce local activist who emanated an undeniable passion. The tone of her voice, the fervent dedication in her eyes, it stirred something deep within him that had lain dormant for too long. She spoke of the town's history with pride, illuminating the stakes beyond mere bricks and mortar, igniting a flame that drew him closer and eroded his well-crafted barriers. Yet just as he began feeling at home in this quaint landscape, a cold chill disrupted the air. Corporate interests were circling, eager to dismantle the land and replace it with luxury housing. Oliver's internal conflict escalated into a tempest of contradictory emotions. He was torn. Was his loyalty to family and roots worth finite corporate gain? Each time he envisioned his empire, the allure of wealth clashed violently with the moral implications of pushing a community deeper into despair. Anxiety clawed at his throat. He was no longer merely a billionaire but an unanchored soul, navigating waters brimming with stakes beyond profit. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. He confronted himself head-on. How far would he go to protect the lifeline of a town that, until now, had only belonged to memory? The realization hit hard, the pressure mounted, and the reality was deafening. Surrounded by locals watching him with a mix of hope and desperation, he felt the burn of their expectations weighing heavily against the freedom his wealth promised. In a moment poised for decisive action, a siren blared from the distance, jarring him back from the brink of decision. The stakes had never been higher, and unsure of the path ahead, Oliver now felt the haunting truth. Embracing his family's legacy could cost him everything he thought he wanted. Would he uncover the depths of loyalty and sacrifice before it was too late? Oliver sat in the battered rocking chair on the porch of the ranch, the sun dipping lower in the sky, painting the horizon in hues of orange and lavender. The warm breeze whispered secrets of the land. It felt alive, a raw contrast to the icy towers of Manhattan he had left behind. Yet, as tranquility washed over him, the weight of his impending choices loomed larger, a specter haunting the corners of his mind. The conversation with Sarah echoed in his thoughts. She had roused a sense of urgency that was foreign to him, an urgency not fueled by profit margins, but by heavy stakes rooted in lives and histories. Each word she spoke left fingerprints on his conscience. He glanced at the fields that extended beyond the ranch, imagining them transformed into rows of gleaming condos and upscale shops. The vision repulsed him. With a measured breath, Oliver pushed himself back into a world of action. He was a man skilled at crafting narratives, at weaving together interest for a greater gain. But rather than crafting a deal, he needed to create a connection. He scrolled through his contacts, pondering which of his executive friends would support him, when instinct stopped him cold. This wasn't about leveraging power or connections. This was about what he could give, not what he could extract. Determination ignited within him. If he was to save this land, he would need to engage the community, understand their stories, and advocate for that very history Sarah had so fervently discussed. With that thought, he decided to call a town meeting, an invitation to gather local voices to amplify the heartbeat of the community. He saw it as a chance not just to listen, but to act. Arriving at the modest community center the next evening, the atmosphere seemed charged with anticipation. Rows of chairs lined the space, filled with mothers cradling children, farmers adjusting their caps, and elders leaning forward in their seats, eyes bright with hope and caution. He felt their gaze shift to him as he wheeled in, the billionaire who had traded the penthouse for a ranch. "Thank you all for coming," Oliver began, his voice imbued with an urgency that surprised him. The familiarity of boardroom bravado was absent. Instead, he felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility. "I'm here because I want to hear from you. I want to understand what this land means to you." Observing their reactions, he could see the flickers of skepticism. As he detailed his vision, not plans for corporate takeover, but a commitment to preservation and respect for their heritage, he sensed a shifting tone. Questions were posed, concerns aired, but gradually they began to see a glimmer of alignment between his narrative and theirs. As the meeting unfolded, Oliver discovered a new resilience within himself. Interacting with the townsfolk breathed new life into him. Their optimism chipped at the remnants of his old self. Yet, amongst the community's struggles, he noted hints of doubt about his sincerity. Could he transcend the role of the billionaire turning savior? The realization struck like a bolt. His wealth, his very identity, could be a bridge, not a barrier, should he choose to reshape its narrative. This small town required more than just a financial backer. It demanded a steward, someone ready to roll up their sleeves, engage in desperate struggles, and advocate for each individual story. The meeting concluded with mixed emotions. Some were tentatively hopeful, others remained wary. As he navigated through the crowd, a gentle grip on his arm made him turn. It was Sarah, her brow furrowed in concern. "You can't just throw money at this, Oliver. They need to see you're committed." "Then I'll show them," he replied, fire igniting once more within his chest. The redemption of not just the land but of himself lay in active engagement. He could no longer simply administer power from above. Now was the time to step outside the gilded walls he had become accustomed to perhaps rediscover a purpose aligned with deeper meanings. Yet as determination surged within him, he couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was yet to come. Facing corporate interests intent on cashing in would test every ounce of his resolve. Would he risk everything he had built to protect what he was beginning to learn he truly valued? The question lingered like an echo in the air, promising that the journey was just beginning. Oliver awoke with a tension in his chest, the dawning light spilling over the ranch, illuminating both familiar pathways and unfamiliar choices. The weight of yesterday's meeting fused with an urgency he could not shake, almost beckoning him into a larger narrative that was tangled in the threads of the lives he had interacted with. He needed to act, yet the next step eluded him. Determination carved a path in his mind. Brewing coffee in the small kitchen felt ceremonious, the aroma reminding him of the rituals of his past where every detail mattered in a boardroom agenda. But this was different. The stakes were more profound, and the players were everyday people, not just names on a balance sheet. What he needed now was to go deeper, to step directly into their lives. An idea began to crystallize. Instead of merely talking about the land and its future, he would experience it firsthand. He could not expect to communicate the value of the community's spirit from his high horse. There, rooted in the dirt, Oliver could potentially find not just stories but also insights into their struggles and aspirations. First, he made a quick call to Sarah. "Let's set up visits. I want to see the farms, the homes, everything that makes this place what it is." He could picture her smile at the other end of the line, a reassurance to his ramping enthusiasm. "Let's bring people along. We need to document their stories together. We need to make this a shared journey." The days followed in bursts. Every morning involved a new location, whether plowing a field alongside the farmers or gathering with young families on their porches. The reality of their lives poured into him like the morning sun, cleansing the remnants of his former life. They welcomed him into their homes, their laughter rising like clouds dissipating after a storm. He discovered a talent he hadn't expected: storytelling. Surrounded by tales of hardship, resilience, and hope, he transformed each narrative into written form. By the end of the week, he had gathered a trove of experiences, strikingly vivid and raw. It wasn't about crafting an image, it was about unveiling truths. Yet doubt still fluttered in his gut every time he engaged. What if his feeble attempts were perceived as an intrusion? Each family welcomed him, but would they still see him as an ally, or merely a privileged outsider? Oliver noted the constant oscillation between optimism and trepidation within himself, compelling him to confront the core of his identity as a wealthy businessman. One evening, as he sat with a group of teenagers around a bonfire, one of them asked pointedly, "What are you really doing here, Mr. Langston?" The question pierced through his bravado. "You mean aside from your parents' money?" she ventured, comfortable in her barbs. His heart raced. The teenager's scrutiny was a reminder that the armor of wealth didn't grant him emotional immunity. "I want to support the community, not just through funds but by being part of the fabric here." The words took a moment to settle. They were either intrigued or looking for the punchline. The honesty flashed in their young eyes. In that moment, Oliver realized a discomforting truth. He wasn't prepared for their honesty, nor had he fully embraced the vulnerability required to connect. Gradually he regained his footing, even managing a light-hearted exchange in the spirit of defiance against the stares. They were skeptical, naturally, but the connection formed over stories, whispered secrets he dared to share. Here, he shed the weight of his past, cautiously stepping into this new yet strangely liberating role. But as the week turned toward closing, an unsettling sensation prickled at the back of his mind. He needed to confront corporate interests soon. They wouldn't sit idle while he played steward. The looming threat of impact funds and development projects still hung like a guillotine over the town, a stark reminder of what he stood to lose. Time was running out. An urgent meeting loomed ahead, one that would demand every ounce of adaptation he had fought to cultivate. Would he stand resolute against the corporate tide and protect the very connections he had nurtured? The answer hinged upon his ability to be genuinely vulnerable, not just in spirit but in action. The breath before the plunge was heavy with unknowing as he geared up to face an inevitable confrontation. Which path he would choose was still shrouded in shadow. What lay ahead could forge his path or fracture it entirely. The sun hung low in the sky as Oliver stood outside the dimly lit conference room, his breath steadying in the cool afternoon air. The meeting was imminent. A gathering of corporate heads who understood profit margins far better than the emotional weight of community matters. He could feel the tightening in his chest again, a looming reminder of what he stood to lose. Taking a deep breath, he recalled the stories shared with him over the past week. The farmer whose family had cultivated their land for generations, the single mother juggling multiple jobs just to send her children to school. He let these images lace through his mind, grounding him in the reality he now sought to defend. His thoughts drifted to the teenagers laughing by the bonfire, their expressions still vivid. "What are you really doing here?" echoed in his mind, a question that demanded an answer. If he was going to stand up against the tide, he would have to embody authenticity itself. The conference room door creaked open. Oliver walked in, moving beyond the threshold into a world he knew all too well. A mahogany board table stretched before him, surrounded by some of the most powerful people in the business world. They regarded him with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism, recognizing the newcomer yet questioning his authority. With a tactile focus on the agenda at hand, Oliver quickly shifted gears, employing the storytelling craft he had forged over the last week. "I want to talk about more than numbers," he began, his voice steadying as he felt the urge to convince wash over him. "This isn't about profits, it's about people, the heart of what makes this community thrive." Eyes darted among the executives. Some exchanged knowing glances as if amused by his naivety. "Emotions don't factor into financial forecasts," one of the senior analysts remarked, a hint of condescension in her tone. The room erupted in laughter. Oliver's heart sank, but he steadied himself, holding his ground. "Perhaps," he continued, a surprising assertiveness fueling his words. "But they are the very reason these forecasts exist. What good does a surplus do if the land is lost? What kind of growth thrives on the backs of struggling families?" He noted a few narrowed eyes. Perhaps he had pierced through the hardened shells that encased their thinking. As he navigated through the facts of local agriculture, he wove in the human stories he had collected. The unexpected gift of his newfound storytelling ability transformed the atmosphere. Oliver noted a shift. The laughter faded into ponderous silence, the laughter dissipating into thoughtful consideration. He was actually engaging them. Yet beneath this current of hope, a disturbing realization began to solidify. In his quest to assert the community's worth, he risked alienating some of the very people he needed support from. As he delved deeper into the intricate balance of power, he identified familiar faces, allies in business who often prioritized profit. Were they with him or against him? Fingers brushed against the agenda on the table. The stakes were raising every moment. As discussions progressed into strategic evaluation, Oliver found himself grappling with conflicting emotions, the competing values of his corporate upbringing, and the emotional revelations from his time spent among families who genuinely depended on the land. "Oliver, you don't seem to grasp the implications here," one executive challenged, an edge of frustration creeping into his tone. "Your approach might undermine our plans to revitalize the area. We're talking about financial salvation." His instinct to revert to the familiar world of spreadsheets tugged at him, yet a surge of resilience pulsed through him. What if the very path to salvation was simply more money? But everything, every moment with the townsfolk, had illuminated the intangible need for connection, stability, and genuine investment in their lives. "I stand firm," he asserted, feeling vulnerability ignite a fierce determination within him. "If you proceed without considering the human impact, you will erode the very foundation of the community. This isn't just business. This is our legacy." As the room sat in stunned silence, Oliver realized that he could either yield to the tides of greed or intertwine his fate with the people he had learned to respect. The confrontation was not just with corporate interests, it was within himself, a volatile internal landscape of fear and fortitude. The meeting crested on a precipice of possibility, and as he faced the table of executives, the truth loomed. His true challenge was to bind not just money but hearts and ambitions to the story he was crafting. A sudden thought pierced through. Time was no longer a luxury. Action was vital. Would he venture further into the murky waters of corporate dealings, risking everything he had built? Or would he come to terms with his convictions and discover whether his ambition aligned with the community he had come to care for? The answer tangled itself within the air of confrontation, waiting for resolution. But as Oliver held his ground, the door creaked open again, casting a shadow across the table. Who now appeared at this crucial moment would determine not just his fate, but the future of the land he had grown to love. The atmosphere in the room shifted as the door swung wider, revealing a tall figure dressed sharply in tailored gray. Janet Hartley, the CEO of the company, entered the scene with an aura of command that instantly captured everyone's attention. Oliver's instinctive trepidation surged. This was not just any corporate leader. Janet had an imposing presence that often dictated the discussions and decisions that shaped the entire organization. Her piercing blue eyes locked onto Oliver, a scrutinizing look that felt as if it could strip away his defenses, revealing the vulnerable core beneath. "Oliver, I trust you've been enlightening our team on the value of community," she began, her voice smooth yet edged with skepticism. But let's consider this practically. We are here to strategize, not to engage in philosophical debates about emotion. The room anticipated conflict, tension palpable. Oliver felt himself grappling between his words and the desire to impress the leader of this corporate behemoth. They are not opposing forces, he started, rallying his thoughts amid the doubt swirling around him. The realities of this community are woven into our corporate objectives. If we wish to thrive, we must not just be profitable, but pertinent. Janet raised an eyebrow. Her interest piqued despite her carefully composed demeanor. And how do you suggest we do that? By crafting heartfelt messages or by ensuring we hit our margins? A direct confrontation hung heavy in the air. Adrenaline pulsed through Oliver's veins. Both, he countered, a surprising firmness coming to his voice. This isn't merely about balance sheets. We risk isolating those who provide the very resources we depend on. The growth of our company should not come at the expense of the people who sustain it. Janet paused, considering his words. A tiny victory for Oliver, but he couldn't let it distract him. She wasn't merely an adversary in a corporate battle. She represented the deep-rooted corporate culture that often sidestepped human consequences in favor of numbers. With this recognition, his determination deepened. This was about more than just a meeting. He leaned into this newfound clarity. When we invest in the lives that the land supports, we foster loyalty and a willingness to collaborate. Community connection becomes a compass, with shared goals and values propelling us forward. Around the table, some executives seemed skeptical, while others showed signs of intrigue. The whispers of mutual understanding seemed to rise and fall like waves, each pulse reflecting Oliver's own internal struggle. Was he even making an impact amidst the deep-seated corporate habits ingrained in the hearts of those present? Janet leaned back, her arms crossed as if weighing the merit of Oliver's words. You speak of ideals, but our investors expect return on their investments. Are you suggesting we implement a social responsibility framework that diverts funding away from profit-driving ventures? In that question, Oliver sensed the real challenge, the dichotomy between compassion and commerce, where his burgeoning advocacy for humanity now seemed to clash with fiscal reality. Could he transcend this friction, or would he buckle under pressure and revert to prepackaged responses? The clock ticked loudly in the silence, letting the weight of her question hang, an omen poised to define the meeting's trajectory. He took a breath, mental gears whirring as possibilities swirled in his mind. Could he forge a pathway that intertwined both corporate integrity and social fulfillment? Imagine a model where our investments return profits generated by a united, thriving community, Oliver proposed, feeling the fervor ignite within him once more. This could enhance our brand, foster goodwill, and attract more investors who value ethical practices. Caught in the gravity of his own vision, he could feel the respect he once sought from his peers, merging with an even deeper self-acceptance. The stories of the families, their struggles and triumphs, swirled around him like a guiding light. Oliver realized he had an opportunity to sway a paradigm shift and reshape corporate perceptions, but only if he held his ground. Janet's expression shifted, assessing this new perspective with a contemplative gaze. Perhaps there's merit to your approach. However, she leveled her eyes at him, you need to demonstrate how this viable model survives today's brutal marketplace. The intensity of her challenge sparked something in Oliver, a surge of confidence fueled by the collective stories and the sacrifices made for their livelihoods. I can outline a strategic proposal, he replied, his pulse steadying. One that looks at profitability without obscuring the core human elements. Their exchange forged a bridge extraordinary amidst turbulence. For Oliver, the line between victory and defeat blurred into something he hadn't anticipated. His growth as a communicator, a human advocate intersecting with corporate ambition. As he spoke, an outlook crystallized. Moments lay ahead, fraught with ethical quandaries, moral tests that would put his convictions to the ultimate test. His thoughts spiraled, recalling the faces that had inspired him, now mingling with the voices of skepticism that surrounded him. Just as he felt a newfound clarity, the door swung open once more, revealing a familiar face. one deeply entwined with the threads pulling at Oliver's heart. Suddenly, he was not only fighting for the community, but confronting his past, illuminating shadows that could either strengthen his resolve or fracture everything he had begun to build. What ramifications would this new development unleash, and how would it shape his choices moving forward? The tension began to mount once more, promising deeper revelations lay just beyond the precipice, and Oliver's heart raced at the possibilities. Oliver's heart raced as recognition washed over him, unfamiliar emotions intertwining with his professional resolve. There, standing in the doorway, was Carla. She was no stranger. She was once his mentor in advocacy and community engagement, a figure whose powerful spirit had ignited his passion for social responsibility. But their paths had diverged, and now she stood framed by the office's stark lighting, casting shadows of memories that weren't easily rattled. "Carla," he managed, his voice taut with a complex blend of surprise and uncertainty. Her expression, though welcoming, held a furtive edge, 1,000 unsaid words bubbling beneath the surface. Janet, sharp and perceptive, seized upon the moment, her curiosity sparking. "I see you know each other," she quipped, tilting her head to catch the exchange. "Yes, we worked together on various initiatives a few years back," Oliver replied, framing his response with enough professionalism to shift the focus back onto the meeting, though he felt the weight of nostalgia tugging at him. Carla stepped into the room fully, and the air grew thicker. "I didn't expect to find you here, Oliver," she said, a hint of genuine warmth illuminating her eyes. "I've heard a lot has changed since everything." Her tone was gentle but woven with a probing curiosity that made Oliver recoil slightly. "I'm working on a strategic proposal that integrates community interaction into our corporate model," he said, trying to keep the conversation professional, but felt the vulnerabilities swing like a pendulum between them. "That sounds ambitious," she encouraged, but he detected the unspoken question hanging in the balance. Did he truly understand the consequences of such ideals? Janet interjected, her authoritative presence returning to the forefront. "Perhaps you could elaborate on that, Oliver, with Carla's insights in mind," she said, pressing for clarity, while also acknowledging the potential of their relationship. Oliver's mind spun. The challenge ahead was not about how to structure a proposal, but about how to integrate the raw emotional and ethical pull that Carla represented. "I believe that if we choose to act with integrity and invest in our social fabric, we can actually boost profitability," he began again, his voice laced with a newfound determination. "I envision partnerships that are not just transactional but meaningful, where our decisions reflect our commitments to the people intertwined with our business." Carla's eyes sparkled with interest, and for a fleeting moment, he felt their past connection reinvigorate his voice. "Think of the ways we can craft our narrative, ensuring that our story reflects the resilience of those it touches," he said, watching as his colleagues leaned in, expressions shifting from skepticism to intrigue. Yet that same intrinsic pull from his past merged with the present, creating a tension he struggled to navigate. Could he truly reconcile his passion with the rigorous demands of corporate America, especially in front of someone who had once believed in his potential? What if his aspiration fell short under the weight of expectation? As Janet listened, a look of contemplation crossed her sharp features. "Very well, I see some promise here. But Oliver, ideas mean little without solid backing. You must show how this aligns not just ethically, but financially." He nodded, but the enormity of her challenge loomed large. Each word she spoke felt like a trial designed to provoke. Oliver turned to Carla, seeking unfiltered insight. "What do you think is the biggest barrier in corporate social responsibility today?" Her brow furrowed, and for a moment, the world around them fell silent as she pondered. The disconnection between heart and logic in decision-making. Too often the heart is relegated to the shadows. This resonated with Oliver. "Then let's bring it to light," he exclaimed, energy igniting the room. "Let's prioritize our model in a way that it shows people that caring can coexist with profit." As excitement drenched Oliver's words, he caught sight of Carla's encouraging smile. Yet beyond that, He could feel the past's tension uncoil just a little, allowing for a thread of understanding. But doubt lurked constantly. Were his ambitions genuinely viable? Did he have the innate clarity to reconcile such lofty goals amid fierce corporate realities? Just then, a sound, a sharp rattle from outside followed by distant voices, shattered the reverie. It had come from the corridor, a reminder that the company environment was not solely academic, but a crucible of ambition and rivalry. The unexpected ruckus sent a jolt through him. "What was that?" he asked, the moment shifting, a harbinger resonating with the chaos of thoughts ricocheting in his mind. "Disruptions are part of the game," Janet replied coolly, though her eyes glinted with intrigue. As tension thickened once more, Oliver sensed that this was merely the beginning of larger obstacles to navigate, both from outside forces and within his own burgeoning confidence. He had taken bold steps, but at what cost would they come? Was he ready to face the deeper dysfunctions hidden under the company's polished facade? With uncertainty rising like a tide within him, a sense of urgency contorted his ambitions. A moment of clarity flickered. He might be standing at the precipice of not just a corporate shift, but a personal transformation, a reinvention tethered to the echoes of his past. And as the voices grew louder and closer, another realization struck him. Who else might rise to challenge him or stand with him in solidarity through the storms ahead? This was more than a strategy. It felt like a reckoning was approaching. Would he find the support he craved, or would the very foundations he wanted to build shake beneath him? The thought clenched tight around his heart, as the uncertainties loomed larger. The door swung open further, and the ensuing clash of voices filled the room, bringing with it an unsettling energy that amplified Oliver's internal struggle. The clamor ignited an awareness within him. This wasn't just about showcasing his ideas. It was about reshaping a culture, one that had long been entrenched in values that might oppose his vision. Would he be bold enough to initiate a conversation that could challenge the status quo? Carla's presence remained a buoy against the turbulent waves of doubt. He caught her eye and saw encouragement there, glowing like a beacon through a fog of ambition and fear. Finding resolve in her gaze, Oliver took a deep breath and reoriented his focus back to the meeting. "We already have resources at our disposal," he began, eyes narrowing as thoughts crystallized. "We need to utilize them to prioritize authentic connections. Imagine workshops where employees engage with local communities instead of just processing transactions." He watched as Janet tapped a pen against her notepad, weighing his words. "Interesting approach, but without tangible results, it's just corporate fluff," she countered sharply, each word punctuated by the rhythm of the pen hitting paper. A shot of adrenaline coursed through him. Did he genuinely have the capacity to execute this vision? If not, could he expose the rawness of his ambitious heart to corporate scrutiny? He pressed on. If we can quantify employee engagement tied to community outreach in terms of productivity and retention, we can solidify the narrative that authentic engagement correlates with profitability. The silence that followed was palpable. He remembered Carla's previous guidance about the importance of intertwining emotional intelligence with operational strategy, but facing Janet's skepticism felt like grappling with a heavy weight. This was his moment to prove not only his capabilities but also the validity of integrating his past understanding into a future he yearned to shape. Janet arched an eyebrow, seemingly impressed despite her guarded stance. "And how do you propose we measure that?" Oliver fidgeted slightly, the challenge kicking into gear. He thought about the ineffective ways he had surfed corporate tides, updating slides and patching together updates. "We initiate pilot programs in select departments, showcasing a tangible increase in morale against traditional metrics. Then we iterate based on feedback." As he spoke, the eyes in the room shifted, some processing his thoughts, others questioning if he could back up this promise. His heart beat rapidly, mentally rehearsing the numbers and emotional testimonies he would need. He could feel the stirrings of leadership rising within him, tinged with both anticipation and dread. The noise from the corridor faded into the background, replaced by the subtle clacking of keyboards as his colleagues started taking notes. A wave of hope washed over him. Perhaps this was the turning point. Perhaps he could blend his vision with the company's established goals. Yet his mind drifted to what lay beneath this facade of enthusiasm. The fear of failure lingered like an uninvited guest. Could he truly steer the company toward a transformation? Would the risks he took lead to validation or rejection? And worse, would he lose the respect of his peers if he stumbled? Carla cleared her throat, drawing attention. While this proposal is distinctly promising, Oliver, be mindful of the skepticism that engagement can provoke. There are those who will view it as unnecessary or soft. She cautioned gently, yet her voice overflowed with a mixture of pride and concern. You'll need to armor your emotional insights with strategic foresight. Don't allow the heart to be a mere accessory to business operations. Her words resonated deeply, almost like a personal challenge. Oliver contemplated the weight of emotional appeal in a world that often prized cold numbers over genuine connectivity. He recognized that to bring this to fruition, he would have to navigate through personal and systemic barriers, confronting both his doubts and the inherent bias within a profit-driven culture. Was he prepared to influence those who thrived on the very detachment he sought to dissolve? With each question, Oliver measured his resolve. The stakes felt higher than ever, not just in terms of professional risks, but deep personal risk. He was not just proposing a new project, he was championing a manifesto of integrity against an undercurrent of cynicism. Before he could spiral too far inward, a scuffing sound broke his concentration. Another figure appeared at the doorway. This time, it was a stern-looking executive whose reputation for ruthless efficiency preceded any discussion. Oliver squared his shoulders, readying himself to confront a new potential adversary in this gradual emergence towards transformation. Oliver, the executive stated, his voice cutting through the air with authority, I need to understand what you're planning here and why it matters. A knot tightened in Oliver's stomach. It felt like the very ground was shifting beneath him, the promises of earlier transformed into a battleground. As he glanced at Carla, her support bolstered him. Perhaps he could take the leap. This pivotal moment might just carve a pathway to redefining not only his place within the company, but also the narrative they all followed. Now was not the time to shrink back. He met the executive's gaze, determination solidifying around his core. Because, Oliver began, each word laden with intent, if we don't embrace the idea that our business is part of a broader community, we'll remain irrelevant as the world evolves. As he delivered his statement, a rush of adrenaline coursed through him. He was through the looking glass, teetering on the edge of his own personal threshold, ready to face the unfolding conflict. This was a juncture in which his every belief and goal would be challenged, and perhaps transformed. The executive's eyes narrowed, curiosity piqued and intimidation hanging palpably in the air. Would Oliver's bold claims land steadfastly, or would they plunge into chaos? The path ahead remained uncertain, yet he felt a stirring within, propelling him toward a revelation that could change everything. What was this key insight he had yet to discover, and would he find it before the winds of doubt threatened to knock him off balance? The executive leaned forward, clearly intrigued but maintaining an air of skepticism. Irrelevant is a strong word, Oliver. Let's pretend your idea has merit. What's next? How do you plan to win over the team and the stakeholders who might not support this shift? Oliver felt the pressure mount, but the executive's challenge sparked something buried deep within him, a mix of urgency and clarity. He had been drifting along the currents of bureaucracy for too long. Now, the tides were shifting, and it was time to take control of the ship. First, we create a transparent communication strategy. His voice grew steadier, emboldened by the sight of Carl's approving nod. We'll involve employees at every level in pilot programs, making them co-creators in this journey. Ownership fosters loyalty. The executive scrutinized him, his expression non-committal. And if it fails? If your engagement initiatives lead to nothing but added costs? Then we iterate, Oliver replied, the words spilling out before he could overthink them. But I believe it's far greater than just cost. This is about reshaping our identity. If we engage thoughtfully and earnestly, the intrinsic value could outweigh the initial investment. For the first time, he noticed a flicker of interest in the executive's eyes. The tension shifted palpably in the room, if only for a moment. But Oliver knew better than to dwell on fleeting victories. Each glance exchanged among his colleagues told him they were weighing his worthiness, hoping he wouldn't crumble under scrutiny. A familiar voice chimed in, breaking the silence. "Janet. Your confidence is admirable, Oliver, but let's not overlook the risks involved. What's your contingency plan if the morale boost becomes a burden on productivity?" A low rumble of uncertainty echoed off the walls, but Oliver had been contouring his thoughts in advance. "We'll set key performance indicators before launching any initiative. These metrics will provide us with the data we need to pivot quickly and acknowledge when something isn't working." The executive leaned back, folding his arms, a gesture that felt both defensive and discerning. "You're saying all the right things, but how does this fit into the larger financial picture? Numbers are what drive decisions here, not a sentimental attachment to the community." A wave of panic clawed at Oliver's heart. He couldn't slide back into fear, he had to confront it. It's not sentimentality, it's strategy. Studies show that companies emphasizing community engagement experience significantly lower turnover rates and higher employee satisfaction, translating into real savings. Fostering genuine connections can lead to increased productivity and innovative solutions that directly contribute to the bottom line. A tense pause hung in the air as he stood his ground, realizing this was the crux of his challenge. Not just engaging the employees, but convincing the very architects of the company's direction. "Oliver, this is ambitious," Carla interjected, leaning forward with both interest and concern. "But your ability to execute will rely heavily on your own resilience. You will face resistance, and every pushback could feel personal when it involves your beliefs." Her insight hit him hard, revealing the emotional weight behind corporate maneuvering. This initiative was personal. It was intertwined with his identity and vision, yet the potential for failure loomed larger than ever. Would his desire for transformation be enough? As if sensing his doubts, the executive's scrutiny softened slightly. "Prove to us it works. But be warned, corporate culture can be like a freight train. You don't just amend its course, you redefine it, potentially at a great cost. Can you handle that possibility?" "Yes," Oliver declared, determination coursing through his veins. "I can and will. I'm ready to redefine what value means in our organization." The executive smirked slightly, a flicker of admiration crossing his features. "Very well then. You've got my attention. But bear in mind, transformation isn't just a proposal. It's a gauntlet." With that, the air began to change, leaving Oliver standing at a crossroad. Each step into this world of engagement broke away layers of self-doubt, exposing a burgeoning leader ready to embrace risk. But the meeting had ended, and Oliver felt a void where reassurance had once lingered. The battle ahead loomed larger than any statistic, every ally both a support and a potential adversary. Would the next stages allow his vision to flourish, or would the infrastructure stifle him? As the team dispersed, Oliver took a deep breath and stepped into the corridor. He aimed to anchor himself in the belief that transformation was not merely a position, it was an invitation to evolve. What he didn't realize was that lurking beyond the conference room's door lay revelations that would push him to reevaluate who he was within this corporate labyrinth. What deeper truths would he need to confront, and what shadows of doubt would he need to pierce through his journey to authentic leadership? Oliver paced the corridor, the sterile fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, feeding into his rising anxiety. The weight of the meeting and its unsatisfied equilibrium twisted in his stomach. He felt like a diver poised at the edge of a cliff, ready to leap but unsure of what lay beneath the surface. How would he tackle queries that hadn't been asked yet? The faces of his colleagues lingered in his mind, their skepticism mingled with fleeting support. Doubting glances gnawed at him, part of him already anticipating future conflicts, and he questioned if he truly possessed the mettle to navigate what lay ahead. He needed a plan, a clear strategy not just for the initiative but his own emotional resilience. The stakes were now higher than ever. Transformation was not just about new policies or engagement metrics. It had to come from a deeper personal commitment. The challenge, he realized, was introspection. As he arrived at his office, Oliver leaned against the doorframe, taking a moment to gather his thoughts. There was a mirror at the corner of the room, slightly smudged, but functional enough to reflect more than just his physical appearance. He would need to confront the unsightly doubts. What did he fear most? Failing was daunting, yes, but the idea of not trying stung more painfully. With renewed purpose, he pulled out his journal, a ritual he recently embraced, and started jotting down his thoughts. He wrote about his vision, feeling the ink coalesce his aspirations. The engagement initiative wasn't meant solely to reshape company dynamics. It was a mirror reflecting his intrinsic desire for connection and belonging, a paradox in the corporation's stiff existence. Yet there was a nagging doubt. Did he have the charisma to rally his team around this vision? The kind of leadership that inspired loyalty, creating a community within a corporation. He needed to find touch points, words that would resonate in the ears of stakeholders, motives that would bridge the chasm between risk and reward. He recalled a story of a past mentor, a leader who had unlocked doors through connection. She had often spoken of people glue, the adhesive nature of shared stories and mutual experiences that bound teams together. Oliver needed to find that glue, to use it as a tool to collapse the barriers he now faced. With determination aflame within him, he began sketching strategies for engagement. Organizing informal lunch meetings would create opportunities for dialogue outside the boardroom, opening avenues for ideas that might otherwise go unheard. He envisioned workshops designed to develop employee skills and creative brainstorming, allowing the entire workforce to contribute to the initiative's growth. He wrote down keywords: connection, community, ownership, inspiration. As he spilled the ink, he felt certainty rise against the tide of apprehension. But as the vision crystallized, the apprehension also grew. Engagement was not guaranteed. It was rife with risk, and Oliver questioned whether he could endure the potential fallout if his ideas failed. The dread of disappointing his colleagues and ultimately himself loomed like a shadow. Could he confront those fears head-on? With a deep breath, he closed the journal, sensing clarity emerging. The fire inside pushed him forward. He resolved to confront his doubts head-on, embracing them as a necessary part of the journey. Hours passed, and though he remained deep within his thoughts, he began to notice the eerily quiet office. Perhaps it was time to enact his strategies, to share the vision. However, he knew that for every idea shared, every strategy launched, a lurking adversary would be ready to challenge him, wearing masks of indifference or outright hostility. "What would happen if I share this with Janet?" he muttered, the echo of her concerned voice lingering in his ears. What if she found holes in his approach? Would the spark of partnership ignite conflict instead? Oliver settled into a new confidence, a blend of exhilaration and fear. If he could convince his colleagues that growth lay not in merely surviving but thriving through collaboration, then maybe, just maybe, they could redefine the corporate culture together. With a purposeful stride, he left his office and sought out Janet's desk. A part of him feared the encounter. She could challenge him, but also could be the catalyst for deeper strategic planning. As Oliver headed toward her, he didn't realize that his path would lead to unexpected revelations that would not only transform his professional landscape, but his very understanding of leadership. Where would the conversation lead, and could he navigate through the potential obstacles? The answers to those questions awaited just behind her office door, and with every step, the tension mounted. As Oliver approached Janet's office, he felt a mix of trepidation and resolve. The door loomed before him, a tangible barrier separating his newfound aspirations from the remnants of a corporate identity that had often prioritized profit over connection. Yet today, he wouldn't be just another cog in the machine. He was determined to convey the importance of empathy in business. "Come in." Janet's voice echoed from beyond the door, ringing with authority. He opened the door, stepping into the brightly lit office that symbolized both opportunity and challenge. "Janet, thank you for meeting with me," he said, consciously steadying his voice. "Of course, Oliver. I've heard rumblings about your engagement initiative," she replied, glancing up from her paperwork. Her expression was a combination of curiosity and skepticism, allowing Oliver to see the slight opening he needed. "I'd like to discuss how we can integrate this initiative into our strategic framework," he began, deploying the confidence he had meticulously cultivated over the last few weeks. "I believe that fostering genuine connections with our employees and the community can improve morale and drive performance in measurable ways." Janet leaned back in her chair, her gaze piercing yet intrigued. "You know, getting people on board isn't about just presenting data. It's about creating something they can believe in, something bigger than just another corporate initiative." He nodded, recognizing an ally in her insight. "Exactly. That's why I want to initiate workshops and partnerships that bring our employees together with community members. We can create a narrative that reflects not just our goals as a company, but also the feedback of the people who depend on those goals." "Bold approach," she said, lifting an eyebrow. "But what if the employees see this as just another managerial ploy? Then we give them ownership. We make them co-creators," he asserted, feeling the weight of her gaze. "If we involve them in these projects from the very beginning, we'll cultivate an environment that values personal investment. Their stories will shape our strategies." Janet's posture softened slightly, and for the first time he sensed her considering his perspective on a deeper level. "And what about outcomes? How do you plan on illustrating that the initiative is worth the investment?" With swift resolve, Oliver pulled out his journal, the pages filled with strategies and insights he had meticulously crafted. "We can set specific metrics, employee engagement scores, retention rates, and even local community feedback. I envision not just positive anecdotes but quantifiable data we can use to showcase the initiative's impact." She studied his notes with a rare intensity, and he took a moment to appreciate the gravity of her position. The potential influence she wielded in shaping the future of their company rested on their discussion. "You've clearly put in the work," Janet finally commented. "This will require a company-wide commitment. Are you prepared to champion this initiative in front of the board?" Her question sent a thrill through his body. "Yes, I'm prepared to advocate for this approach despite the obstacles." But as he said those words, he felt the past creeping into the corners of his mind. Could he withstand the collective skepticism of the board members? This was not merely about the initiative. It was his chance to redefine his identity from a distant tycoon to a genuine advocate and leader. Janet scrutinized him, weighing her next words carefully. "If you're going to take this to the board, you need to be ready for resistance. Not everyone will see value in emotional engagement." "I understand that," he replied fiercely. "But if it's not about numbers reflecting human experiences, what exactly are we measuring? A bottom line that can't tell the whole story?" Silence enveloped the room. It felt monumental, the very air charged with the possibility of change. Finally, Janet's expression softened, revealing a shadow of admiration. "All right, Oliver. If you believe in your vision, let's prepare together. You'll need to articulate this case efficiently, with evidence that speaks to the board." A sense of triumph washed over him, but alongside it came the trepidation of preparing for a larger audience. He was no longer just defending a project. He was essentially fighting for a transformation. Days turned into nights filled with preparation, and as he articulated his vision to colleagues and stakeholders, he found himself enveloped in a wave of unexpected support. When he stood in front of the board that day, presenting his proposal, he felt the weight of the community on his shoulders and their hopes fueling his words. "Some might say this initiative is just another corporate gesture," he declared, his voice unwavering. "But allowing a community and our employees to shape our narrative is the sustainable path forward. It's not just about wealth. It's about legacy. What kind of company do we want to create?" Their eyes moved across one another, captivated by the gravity of his narrative. He paused, allowing silence to weave between them, letting the weight of his words settle. "I know you may doubt this approach," he continued, leaning into the unease. "But effectiveness isn't just measured with numbers. It's also about patient nurture and genuine care. And I refuse to stand behind that notion of indifference any longer." The meeting progressed amid tension and nuance, but ultimately, recognition emerged in the skeptical faces. One by one, the board members found themselves swayed, forgiving his initial naivety in favor of the conviction burgeoning in his heart. Later that afternoon, as he exited the boardroom, he felt the unmistakable coolness of autumn in the air, fresh and invigorating. The glow of the sun caught in the glass clusters of the city skyline, reflecting a shift not only in his surroundings, but within himself. He had transcended beyond the slick corridors of corporate wealth into a realm of advocacy, leadership, and profound connection. Sitting on his porch at the ranch that evening, the soft breeze rustled the leaves and sent whispers of adventure through him. Looking out over the landscape, he embraced the tranquil beauty that rubbed against his urban existence. It was no longer merely about strategy in the business world, but about creating a heart across all dimensions he belonged to: community, employees, and his own life. In the weeks that followed, he saw the blossoming of a movement he had aimed to cultivate. People from various departments engaged openly in the initiative, feeling empowered to speak their truth. They shared stories that interconnected, weaving a vibrant tapestry of shared dreams and aspirations. Long after the last decision was made in the boardroom, solitude gave way to affirmation. Oliver understood whose legacy he was truly building. It was no longer just his. It was the tapestry of lives intertwined with his own. As he gazed at the horizon, he knew that each moment of uncertainty had sharpened his purpose. He had transformed from a billionaire facing disconnection into an engaged leader capable of creating lasting change. The man who once stood at the precipice, alone amid stunning architecture, now leveraged each sunrise as a reminder that true prosperity blossomed from collaboration and connection. Embracing the possibilities ahead, he leaned into the quiet strength that dawned within him. The strength to lead, to inspire, and to belong. The journey that had started with an unexpected letter had evolved into a legacy of understanding, advocacy, and profound human connection. Now more than ever, he believed, this was just the beginning. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment their reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now, and don't wait even one more second to share. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.